Criterion A is all about how well you use the language, and it applies to your paper 1 as well as for your oral exam. There's no way around it. You need a handful of idiomatic expressions to get a 7. It's that simple. You can see that the biggest difference between the second highest and the highest mark band is the inclusion of idiomatic expressions. Because of this, you should have mind maps or at least a list of different idiomatic expressions that you can use for every single one of the 5 different topics. That way, regardless of the question that you're given and which question that you pick, you can use idiomatic expressions for each one. For example, right before my mock exams, I thought I was pretty confident with my Chinese idiomatic expressions, but I realized that I knew pretty much none that had anything to do with the subtopics of identity. So I made sure to add those new idiomatic expressions to my list. So make sure you have enough idiomatic expressions for each one of the 5 different topics and the subtopics. This is the exact same for the oral exam, but I should also mention that in the oral exam, it specifically states the importance of using complex grammatical structures. So you want to make sure you have notes on a variety of grammatical structures, from formal to informal. Criterion B is all about how well you answer the question, and to get the top band, you need fully developed ideas. To make sure I had all different ideas in my head right before the exam, I made sure to create different mind maps for every single topic and subtopic so that I could see that regardless of what question I'd be asked, I knew exactly what I'd be able to talk about. For example, for the third theme, human ingenuity, I'd be very comfortable talking about it in Chinese because of the 4 great inventions and the old and new inventions. Also Spanish, I wouldn't be so comfortable. So for Spanish, I really had to make sure that I created different mind maps for this theme, so whenever I walked in the exam, I was prepared. Basically, you don't want to memorize a whole text or different paragraphs before the exam. Instead, you want to memorize and get ideas flowing in your head before the exam so that you're prepared regardless of what you're given in the exam. When you first get your question for paper 1, you want to make sure to analyze a question as closely as you can with all the language you can understand in it. For the vast majority of questions, you'll find that they ask you to achieve a few different purposes, so you want to make sure you section off each one of those purposes and address each purpose with more or less the same word count. For example, for this question here that was in the 2019 November English BSL exam, firstly, you have to share your opinion and demonstrate that you think this is a good idea. Secondly, you have to describe the initiative, and thirdly, you have to explain the benefits it brings. Whilst this may sound obvious, you want to make sure you incorporate every single detail mentioned in the question into your text, because you have to act like the marker hasn't read your question before and has no idea what you're about to write about. Basically, you should refer to every single word mentioned in the question and make sure it's included in your paper 1 task. Lastly, since the marking criteria mentions relevant examples, you want to make sure that you have an adequate amount of culture knowledge. Basically, if you want to sound like a local when you're writing this task, you should know the country like a local would. For Spanish, I ended up writing a 3,000 word document over a couple months talking about every single culture knowledge aspect that I could include for the different themes and sub-themes. You need to know the local food, traditions, and way of life for a particular region like the back of your hand. You need to sound like a native speaker and a local. Whether it's including slang from this particular region for an informal written task, or whether you're including a new festival that's only celebrated in that tiny region, you can talk about anything, but anything that makes you sound like a local is incredibly worthwhile. Often textbooks are based in one region, so they can be really good starting points to learn broad information about that area, but you want to make sure you also get help from online and also from your teacher, and if you have friends from that region, that'd be even better. Criterion C is all about how you write it, and you want to make sure that the purpose and audience matches the tone of your writing. These should be by far the 6 easiest marks you will get in the whole IB program. All you have to do is just write it like the actual text type, and then you have to just match the audience and purpose with the tone that you write with. It's pretty simple. The conventions for every text type is different for every language. For example, for Spanish, at the end of a letter, you need to put your signature and then your name below it. However, for Chinese, you only put your name. Whilst this may only sound like a small detail, these 2 differences are explicitly mentioned in the marking criteria. So you want to make sure to go through your own marking criteria for the language you're studying and look at Criterion C and find out what aspects they're particularly looking for every single text type. And yes, these past papers will be from the old syllabus, but the text types haven't changed. This is still relevant to the new syllabus. After finding out what the syllabus requires for every single text type, you should then write out a cheat sheet where you write down every text type and the structure of the text type as well. You want to make sure that you know the vocab for a text type. In your final exam, when you only have 3 questions to choose from, you don't want to pick one question just because you weren't sure exactly how to write the end of a letter. You want to make sure you know these words off by heart. And honestly, I think they might be the most important words in your language B. That's why I made a whole separate Quizlet just for these words, because I knew how important they would be.